You think you need their apology to heal, to close the wound, to finally breathe again? But the truth is, you're bleeding because you keep waiting at the door of a house they already burned down. You're stuck in that loop, aren't you? Replaying the moment, rewriting the conversation, imagining the version of them who suddenly gets it, who suddenly feels it, who finally looks you in the eye and says, "I was wrong, I'm sorry." And in your mind, that sentence is the key to peace, the key to closure, the key to your life coming back online. But listen to me, some people will never say sorry, not because they forgot, not because they don't know, because their entire identity depends on never admitting they were the problem. And if you don't understand that, you'll keep confusing silence for mystery, cruelty for complexity, and your own dignity for something you can bargain with. Now, real quick, if you're the type of man who needs reminders like this, if you need the truth spoken to you when you're tempted to crawl back into fantasy, then subscribe. Not for me, for you. Because you don't rise by motivation once. You rise by repetition. You rise by hearing the truth until you finally stop negotiating with the lie. Here's the thesis. Here's what it really means when they never apologize. It means you're waiting for accountability from someone who survives by avoiding it, and your healing can't be held hostage by someone else's character defects. Let's build the ladder, step by step, because you don't need comfort right now. You need clarity. The misconception is this. If they understood how much they hurt me, they would feel bad. And if they felt bad, they would apologize. And if they apologized, I could finally move on. That sounds logical. It sounds human. It sounds fair. It's also the trap. Hard truth. They might understand. They might remember. They might even feel a flicker of guilt for half a second. But they will still never give you the apology, because giving it would cost them more than losing you ever did. Why? Root cause. Because apology requires ownership, and ownership requires humility, and humility requires a stable sense of self. Many people don't have that. They have an image, a mask, a narrative. They aren't protecting their peace, they're protecting their story. And if they admit what they did to you, then they have to admit what they've done to others. They have to admit who they really are when nobody is clapping. They have to face the damage trail behind them. And that is too painful for someone who has built their entire life around never being the villain in their own movie. So what do they do instead? They minimize, they deflect, they twist the timeline, they change the subject, they accuse you of being too sensitive. They bring up your reaction to distract from their action, they punish you with silence, they smear you to mutual friends, they act confused when you're clear, they act calm when they're cruel, so you look unstable for having a nervous system. That's called gaslighting. That's called emotional evasion. That's called a refusal to self-reflect. And if you keep waiting for an apology from someone who operates like that, you are basically standing outside a locked door, begging the thief to return what he stole while he's inside your house wearing your clothes. Let's talk about what it costs you, because this is where men lose years. It costs you your focus. You can't fully lock in on your purpose because part of your mind is still running a courtroom, still building a case, still collecting evidence, still planning the perfect closing argument that will finally make them say, "Okay, you're right." It costs you your peace. You wake up with that tight chest. You go to sleep with that unfinished sentence. You scroll, you stalk, you check, you reread old messages like they're scriptures that might reveal the secret meaning. It costs you your self-respect because every day you wait for them to validate your pain, you are telling yourself quietly, "My feelings only matter if the person who harmed me agrees they matter." Read that again in your head. Feel how weak that is. Not you, your position, the posture. It costs you your standards because the longer you sit with disrespect, the more normal it starts to feel. You start calling crumbs closure. You start calling avoidance being overwhelmed. You start calling selfishness, they have trauma. And yes, maybe they do, but trauma explains behavior. It does not excuse it. And it damn sure doesn't obligate you to keep bleeding politely. So here's the reframe. Closure isn't something they give you. Closure is something you decide. Closure is you looking at the evidence and making a judgment. Closure is you accepting that the apology you want is the very thing their ego will never allow. Closure is you saying, "I'm done waiting for someone else to become who they should have been. Because the truth is, you're not just waiting for an apology, you're waiting for a version of them that probably never existed. You're waiting for the person you saw in the beginning, the charm, the warmth, the intensity, the I've never felt this with anyone. And you keep thinking, that person is in there. No, that person was a strategy. I know that one hurts. Sit with it. Some people don't reveal themselves over time. They maintain an act until they secure access. Access to your body, access to your loyalty, access to your attention, access to your resources, access to the best parts of you. Then the mask slips, and instead of apologizing, they blame you for noticing. So let me ask you the question you've been dodging. If they never apologize, are you going to stay broken forever? Are you going to let their silence become your sentence? Are you going to keep living like the judge of your worth is the same person who proved they don't respect it? Because if that's the plan, that's not love. That's bondage. That's called attachment to your own suffering. And I'm not saying that to insult you. I'm saying it to wake you up. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. Waiting for an apology is sometimes your way of staying connected to them without calling it connection. Because if they apologize, there's resolution. And if there's resolution, you have to decide. You have to move. You have to let go. And that's terrifying because letting go means you face the emptiness they left behind. So instead, you keep the wound open. You keep the story alive. You keep them in your head like a tenant who hasn't paid rent in years. You keep hoping. And hope is powerful when it's pointed at the right thing. But when hope is pointed at a person who has already shown you who they are, hope becomes self-harm with good branding. You don't need their apology. You need your standards back. You need your spine back. You need the part of you that used to know instantly what disrespect feels like and didn't need a committee meeting in your mind to approve leaving. Now let's get even more precise. Why does it break you so much that they won't say sorry? Because an apology would confirm reality. It would confirm that you weren't crazy, that your pain wasn't too much, that you weren't making a big deal, that you weren't misunderstanding. It would confirm that what happened happened. And if they refuse to apologize, it feels like they're erasing your reality. And that is exactly why you must stop expecting them to validate reality. Reality doesn't need their permission. Your experience doesn't need their signature. Your nervous system doesn't need their agreement to be legitimate. That's called self-validation. And self-validation is a man's job. Not because you're cold, not because you don't care, but because you refuse to hand the keys of your inner world to someone who has already proven they'll drive it into a wall. So here's the shift. You stop asking, will they ever be sorry? And you start asking, what does it say about me that I'm still waiting? Not as self-hate, as self-responsibility, because you can't control their character. You can control your choices, and that is where your power lives. Now I'm going to give you an archetype because you need a picture. You need a standard to move toward. There's a man. Call him grounded, call him disciplined, call him dangerous in the quiet way. He doesn't need to announce his healing. He doesn't need to post quotes. He doesn't need to prove he's over it. You can tell by the way he moves. He doesn't chase clarity from people who thrive on confusion. He doesn't beg for honesty from liars. He doesn't plead for empathy from someone who uses empathy as bait. He listens once, maybe twice. Then he watches behavior. He doesn't argue with patterns. He doesn't try to win emotional debates with someone committed to misunderstanding him. He has boundaries that don't shake when he feels lonely. He has purpose that doesn't disappear when he feels pain. He can sit in grief without making it an excuse to return to disrespect. And when he realizes someone won't take accountability, he doesn't make speeches. He doesn't deliver long paragraphs hoping the right words will create a conscience. He just withdraws access. Because self-respect isn't loud. Self-respect is final. That man still feels. He still misses. He still has nights where the memories hit him like a punch. But he doesn't confuse missing someone with needing them. He doesn't confuse chemistry with compatibility. He doesn't confuse attachment with love. He doesn't confuse an apology with transformation. He knows. A person can apologize and still not change. And a person can refuse to apologize and still know exactly what they did. So he stops making his healing dependent on their lips. He makes it dependent on his actions. Now, you want actionable? Good, because talking without doing is just entertainment. Here's what you do. Tight sequence, no fluff. First, you stop chasing the conversation that will never happen. Stop sending the one last message. Stop writing paragraphs. Stop asking questions you already know the answer to. If they wanted to make it right, they wouldn't need you to beg them to care. Second, you stop romanticizing their potential. Potential is not a relationship. Potential is not character. Potential is not safety. Potential is a fantasy you use to avoid accepting the loss. Third, you name what happened in plain language, not poetic language, not "we were both hurt." Plain language. They lied. They cheated. They betrayed. They manipulated. They abandoned. They crossed a line, because when you soften reality, you extend your suffering. Fourth, you grieve without negotiation. You don't grieve to get them back. You grieve to get you back. You let the sadness come. You let the anger rise. You let the disappointment speak. You stop acting like your emotions are evidence you made a mistake leaving. Emotions are withdrawal symptoms. You're detoxing from a bond. Fifth, you cut the supply lines. If you keep checking their social media, you're not healing. You're picking the scab. If you keep asking mutual friends, you're not moving on. You're outsourcing your peace to a rumor mill. If you keep rereading messages, you're not processing. You're relapsing. Sixth, you redirect the energy into structure. Sleep, training, work, nutrition, skill building, brotherhood, sunlight, discipline. Not because these things magically erase pain, but because they give your pain a container. A man without structure becomes a hostage to his moods. Seventh, you set a new rule. You do not seek closure from people who profit from leaving you open-ended. You stop trying to get a clean ending from someone who enjoys the mess. Eighth, you practice the sentence that will save you. Even if they never apologize, I'm still moving forward. Say it again, slower. Even if they never apologize, I'm still moving forward. That sentence is a line in the sand. Now let's go deeper, because some of you are thinking, but I need them to understand. I need them to feel it. Why? So they can carry what you're carrying? So they can hurt too? Be honest. Part of you wants justice, and that's human. But here's the upgrade. Justice isn't them suffering. Justice is you becoming untouchable by the same type of person ever again. Justice is you learning the lesson so deeply that the universe never has to repeat the exam. Justice is you raising your standards so high that people like that can't even get close enough to do damage. Justice is you not needing revenge, because the best revenge is being unrecognizable. In the way you move, in the way you choose, in the way you no longer tolerate. You stop. You stop explaining. You stop hoping. You stop waiting. You stop checking. You stop bargaining. You stop rehearsing the apology in your head like it's a song you can't turn off. And then you start. You start choosing yourself. You start building. You start lifting. You start studying. You start saying no. You start telling the truth in your own mind. You start respecting your own boundaries even when it hurts. Because let me tell you something. The pain of letting go is sharp, but it's clean. The pain of holding on is dull, and it's dirty. Clean pain heals. Dirty pain infects. And you've been infected with a story that says, if they don't apologize, I can't be okay. That's a lie, a dangerous lie, because it keeps your future under the control of someone from your past. Now, I'm not telling you forgiveness is mandatory. I'm not telling you to pretend it didn't matter. I'm not telling you to become positive. I'm telling you to become free. Freedom is not them changing. Freedom is you changing what you tolerate. Freedom is you refusing to chase a person who proved they don't deserve your pursuit. Freedom is you accepting that some people don't have the emotional tools to be decent and deciding that you are no longer volunteering to be their lesson. You want to know what real closure looks like? Real closure is quiet. It's you waking up one day and realizing you haven't checked their name in weeks. It's you hearing a song and feeling nothing but a distant memory. It's you being able to say, yeah, that happened, without your chest tightening. It's you realizing you don't need them to admit it because you admitted it. You faced it. You survived it. You learned from it. And look at me, because this is the part that will either set you free or expose you. The reason you want their apology is because you want to believe you mattered to them the way they mattered to you. But sometimes you mattered as a resource, not as a soul. And that hurts. That hits your pride. That hits your heart. But it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their capacity. You can be priceless and still be mishandled by someone who doesn't know what value is. So stop trying to convince them you are valuable. You don't argue your value, you demonstrate it by leaving. And if you're thinking, but what if they come back? Listen carefully. If someone only respects you after they lose you, they didn't respect you. They respected access. And a man with self-respect doesn't negotiate access with someone who proved they abuse it. Now, maybe you're the guy who's saying, but they had reasons. They had a rough past. Okay, and your compassion does not require your self-destruction. Your empathy is not a contract that says you must stay. You can understand someone and still walk away. You can love someone and still choose distance. You can miss someone and still say, not at the cost of my dignity. That's called maturity. That's called self-command. That's called being the kind of man who doesn't abandon himself just because someone else did. Because here's the ultimate disrespect, not what they did. It's what you do to yourself after they do it. It's you chasing. It's you begging. It's you shrinking. It's you accepting half-truths and half-effort and half-love and calling it being patient. No, that's you training people how to treat you. So retrain the world, starting now. You don't need their apology to heal. You need your permission. Permission to stop waiting. Permission to stop hoping for a conscience. Permission to stop assigning depth to someone who showed you shallowness. Permission to be done. And here's what you're really doing when you let go. You're taking your life out of their hands. You're reclaiming your attention. You're reclaiming your time. You're reclaiming your identity. Because right now, part of your identity is the guy who was wronged. And that's real. It happened. But if you stay there, you'll build a home in a burning building. You are not the guy who was wronged. You are the guy who survived, learned, and leveled up. Identity reset. Say it. I don't chase apologies. I choose standards. I don't beg for clarity. I create distance. I don't wait for accountability. I enforce boundaries. You are the answer, not their words, not their regret, not their apology. You. You deciding that your life is bigger than a person who refused to be accountable. You deciding that peace is a practice, not a gift someone gives you. You deciding that your heart is not a courtroom and your mind is not a prison. And if this hit you, if you felt that tightness in your chest loosen just a little because something finally made sense, then subscribe. Because you don't need more noise, you need more truth. You need clarity when you're tempted to romanticize the past. You need reminders when loneliness tries to sell you disrespect in a prettier box. You're not alone in this. You're not the only man who had to learn the hard way. You're part of a tribe of men choosing self-respect over fantasy, purpose over obsession, reality over hope that's pointed in the wrong direction. Now act like it.